So thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about how to navigate salary reviews and how to manage that in terms of your budgets for this year. So we're going to be giving you some insights into what's happening in the market and then some real sort of strategy with regards to what we're going to be covering. Okay, so first of all, let's look what we're going to cover today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the current context with regards to market movements. Think about things that have changed in terms of current projections and what we're looking at moving forward. Also going to touch on some of the key HR issues that we're seeing, and then thinking about as a HR professional, maybe looking forward to your salary review time, what you need to be thinking about, how to bring that sort of strategy into action. And then we're going to be sharing the Elmo REM tool and some insights into how you might be able to use that tool in order to use some of these strategies. So let's start first of all with understanding the context. So what's going on right now? So the first slide you're going to see is our whole sample movement. So this is our whole sample movements for strategic pay in the New Zealand market. You see that we're giving you data from job size, so going from general staff all the way up to really large CEO, senior execs. And what's really clear here is we're already seeing quite a significant impact with regards to the recession, and particularly in the private sector. Now that kicks in at that middle management, senior management level. So still seeing okay movements down at that general staff. And those movements are quite closely linked across all the three sectors. However, once you get into that middle management, senior management, the movements really drop away. This is really similar, like almost identical to what we saw in 2010 post GFC, in that the private sector, a lot more nimble, was able to react quite a bit quicker, and they led the way in terms of really pulling back on pay increases, and the public sector tends to be a little bit lagging behind. And so that's really interesting. If we look at this next slide, you'll see we've been collecting information for a really long time, over 30 years. But here you'll see this is a time series going back from 2006. And again, you can see that impact of the GFC. What we've done here is we've included the CPI movement, and because it's really interesting just to see how the two sets move and correlate, or actually don't correlate. And I think at this point, it's really important to recognize that CPI and market movements are two different things. So when you think about CPI or inflation, it arises from what people are willing to pay for goods in the market. When you look at market movements, it's what employers are willing to pay for labor. So there is an interaction between the two. And you can see that there is some interaction, but ultimately what you do find is that they do move at different times. And so it's really important not to link directly to CPI. Going on to the next slide, looking at what's happening in the Australian market. So here we've got slightly different levers. We've got the wage price index versus the, again, CPI. So again, over a similar time series, and you can see that overall, I mean, well, you probably can't see because you're looking at the next slide, but if we were to put the New Zealand slide up, there's some pretty similar types of responses in terms of what's going on. The wage growth in Australia is a lot stronger. So wage growth increased 3.4% in the first part, in the last quarter. It's been mostly driven by enterprise bargaining agreements. In the private sector, the wage growth was influenced by administrative wage adjustments due to the aged care work value case and the early childhood education and care worker retention payment. Outside of wages set by those enterprise agreements, wage growth was modest, so similar to what we're seeing in the New Zealand market. And wages set by individual agreements made the smallest contribution to growth in several years. So again, really obvious that private sector's pulling back when they don't have the enterprise agreements. But overall, the Australian economy is faring quite a bit better than the New Zealand economy. So unemployment's still relatively low compared to New Zealand. So they're expecting to see a modest recovery in Australia around 2025. This is New Zealand. We're not anticipating growth until 2026. So you're feeding into that. Yeah, there's probably pretty muted budgets in the next 12 to 24 months with regards to salary increases. The next slide, we're just going to look at forecasts. So this is going back to the New Zealand market, showing what the forecast increases were in the general staff level all the way up to senior exec over the time period. So you can see they have come back, but not nearly at the levels of the 2021 to 2022. However, we suspect that these are overstated because when we look at the next slide, what we can see is forecasts versus actual movements are a lot lower. So we anticipate that any forecast information that you're looking at are probably going to be a little bit overstated, and that actual movements in the next 12 months are probably going to be fairly muted. And that'll be the same in Australia, but not to the extent to what we're seeing in New Zealand. So just looking at this next slide, how are organisations applying the increases in 2025? So again, this is really fascinating. This is from the HR industry benchmark report that Elmo ran, and you can see that a surprisingly large number, well, I'd say a large number, 10% are planning to still apply a flat dollar increase across their organisation. And I will share later on why we don't believe that's a good idea. Then we've got 15% for performance-based only. I'm surprised, given what we just talked about. 10% are still looking to align their increases to inflation. Again, different drivers, so probably not such a good idea. But really interesting. But 30%, close to 30%, are using combination of alignment to market rates and to performance, which is, I would be saying, more along the lines of what we'd consider best practice. When we go on to the next slide, we're having a look at the top issues with regards to staffing and rewards, and we're looking at the top 5 challenges in Australia versus the top 5 issues in New Zealand. So there's some common themes there, but there's some differences. So the number one is in New Zealand is the economy and budget constraints. And in Australia, we've got the upskilling, cross-skilling and reskilling of employees. Second most biggest challenge is the cyber and data security threats in Australia. Number 2 for New Zealand, market pressure and salary adjustments. The economy is not really kicking in for Australia until the top 3, but it's still right up there. And then interestingly, what we've got in Australia at number 5 compared to it doesn't feature in New Zealand is the shortage of on-demand skills and also change fatigue, which is again equal 5th place. So given you've got a slightly better picture in terms of less unemployment in Australia, you probably still got a little bit of that skills shortage issue coming in, which has certainly not been the case in New Zealand. So quite interesting going on there. So how do we respond to these issues? Lots going on, but lots of things that HR professionals can be considering. Key thing is, given what's happening in the market, there has been a lot of change. So really understanding your competition and what's actually happening in the remuneration market. So trying to benchmark against solid market data so that you can make the best decisions with what you're doing, and then spend wisely. So we'll touch on this later on how you can use tools like Elmo Rem, but that you can actually really distribute your salary budgets wisely and making sure you're spending it on your key talent and your high performers. Communicate. So communication is going to be an issue, which I'm going to touch on in the next slide. But firstly, just lots of ways that you can actually keep communicating. So bringing employees on the journey in terms of where you're at, what you're going to be budgeting for increases, what you're going to be prioritising, but also make sure you actually communicate your current policy. And then talking about total rewards, again, if you don't have a huge budget for pay increases, flex into think about your other reward levers that you can pull. Incentives are great when the economy is a little bit unsure or unsteady, because you can set them, and they will pay out when the market's going well, and retract when the market isn't doing so well. And we also recommend asking your employees what they value as well. And finally, really recognizing and celebrating success. So don't just rely on your annual salary review, constantly look at ways to recognize and celebrate when employees are going well. So, in terms of employee communication, I think this is a really interesting topic. And the first topic that I just wanted to cover is just thinking this is a little bit of an old study, but honestly, it still stacks up really beautifully. So, pay is a mystery to most people. So, if you look at this, do you mind just pressing? Sorry, Ben, thank you. Yeah, excellent. So people paid below the market. 72% believe they paid below the market, but close to 30% actually believe that they are paid above or on the market. People who are paid at market level, again, they have less of a belief that they're actually paid market level rates. And then the top people paid above the market and how they actually perceive pay. 42% believed that they were paid below the market. So it just goes to show that it is a mystery, and unless you're actually sharing with your staff about how you go about your salary increases, what your policy is, how you distribute that, they're going to make their own assumptions. And if you've got a high performer who actually believes, even though they're paid above the market, believes that they're paid below the market, you could be at risk of losing them. So do think about those communication. In terms of how much transparency, it is a little bit of a sliding scale. Um, so if we look at this next slide, you'll see that there's quite a bit that you can sort of share with regards to communication. So you got your organization pay and rewards policy. Um, You've got your where the organization is sitting in terms of what their level is, also like what you've aligned, like what market you've aligned to, and then based on all of those factors, how you've actually determined that person's pay. And that's often that sort of one-on-one conversation with the manager. So there's quite a few steps in terms of communication. And I think organizations can sort of forget to actually communicate their policies. And you can actually gain a heck of a lot just by communicating what your policies are, how you pay. And at the time when you do a salary review letter, you can actually be reinforcing what your pay policy is. And that can actually go a really long way. In terms of organisations making the decision around pay transparency, um, there is a scale. So if you look at this next slide, you'll see, you can go from absolutely no access or no detail with regards to how you determine pay, all the way up to absolute extreme, where you have everything available. So we don't see many cases of the extreme, but you see, when we're working with organisations, we see a smattering all the way along. So just to sort of finish this point on the communication, just a few things that we recommend. We don't recommend you go fully transparent without a robust pay structure in place. Make sure that you're really confident about that. You don't want to be more transparent with your job candidates than with your current employees. And then you don't want to leave managers in the dark about their pay policies and practice and equity, because the managers are the people who are actually having those one-on-one conversations. And there's one more: don't apply an across the board increase. It's not a great use of money. And what happens is any pay inequalities are just reinforced. And you'll find that, people who are already paid above where they should be will just get further away from those people who are paid lower. So when you're actually thinking about your own review as an organisation, there are three main approaches that you can take. There's the people-centric approach, the money-centric, and the business-centric. So I will talk through those three and what you might want to consider for your increases this year. So first of all, a people-centric REM system You start out with understanding where your roles are, how well each person has performed, and then you make a call about where you want each person to be sitting in terms of position and range, and then you work out how much that's going to cost. So that's great when you've got lots of money, not great in a situation when you've got a limited budget, but it does, I guess, tick boxes in terms of staff expectations get met. But yeah, it does create an issue with regards to sort of a bit of an entitlement culture because there's no real link back to what budget the organisation has. Then go on to our money-centric REM system. So this one is when you might start with how much money you have. Then you determine how you're going to allocate that. Um, and then you might place some sort of criteria around that. And then typically it's left with the managers to sort of divvy up based on the policy or the criteria. So this can work well in good times and bad because you are controlling your costs. But you know, if there's nothing underpinning how you've actually necessarily divvied up and are leaving a lot of the decisions up to the manager, it can create some issues with fairness. And then finally, you have the business-centric REM system. So really important, I think, to consider what you're trying to achieve and what's really key for your organization right now. And in this situation, you're not only thinking about the market conditions and what your budget is, but you're thinking about who are the people that are really critical that we need to look after, where do we need to focus our budget, what's the current economic situation, and you then make the call in terms of how to divvy it up. So you're making a little bit more of a considered decision with regards to how you sort of spend that budget. So how you might actually distribute a budget, there's a couple of ways that you could do it. So if you look at something like if you don't do performance review, you could do it purely on where where employees are sitting and just pay the adjustment based on that. These are just indicative percentages, but you can see that this is all designed to pull people up to who are low in the range. And then if you are operating a performance outcome based system, you'll see we've got comparisons against current market, again, looking at your position and range, and then applying a performance-based outcome. So those people who are high performers, low in the range, get significantly more money, and you're still able to, if you use a tool such as the Almo REM tool, you're actually able to still divvy up the budget that you might have and provide some quite large increases by spending wisely. So now I'm going to hopefully found that useful, and I will answer questions at the end of this session as well, but now I'm going to pass over to Johnny and he's going to cover the next part.
Hi everyone, my name is Johnny and I'm the product manager here at Elmo. I look after the REM modules. Before we, and thanks again, Cathy, for the insights. Before we go into the tool itself, I just want to emphasize again 2 elements that we're going to be demoing today. One is about pay transparency and how that can be communicated via employees through the mechanism of total reward management system. And the second half of things that I'll be showing you is how we can provide a REM review process that's truly performance driven by the use of matrix. So with that said, I'll be sharing my screen. Hold on a second. All right, cool. Here you go. So the first part is I'll be showing everyone in terms of the total reward management system. So here I'm at the Elmo dashboard homepage. I'm impersonating as Hannah. So as Hannah, I'm also an employee within an organization as well as admin. On to my left-hand menu, there's a section called remuneration. So as an end employees from a total reward management system is ability to provide direct salary package information directly to all of the users and employees. So here, what an organization can do is essentially specifying out what are the other non-monetary benefits that is included as part of the package, things like parking allowances, medical, and the other things that is on top of your base salary. Could be superannuation displayed here, as well as KiwiSaver. So within this page, there's also a function where we are able to display and provide RAM letters, bonus letter associated to that RAM review cycle, so that employees themselves can have direct access to the letter if they want to bring it out to the banks for loans or any personal admin side of things. They would have that directly available here. And at the same time, it also provides ability for all of the people within organization to build up history. So the fact that upon the end of every RAM review cycles, you go through it, you sign off on the process, and then provide the completion of that process, what all of the employees will be able to see is to build on top of the history. You get your new RAM increase figures pushed across, and then your previous RAM package detail will get pushed into history. So over time, you have that sort of end-to-end transparency in terms of how employees or person has progressed from a RAM point of view as well. So this is a total reward management system around the fact that we are communicating beyond just the base salary, but also the other additional benefit that come with it as well. On the second part of things, I'll be showing you around compare ratio and the matrix. So there are three elements involved. One's around the budget. The other is around compare ratio or position in range, and how we're going to use market data to feed into our matrix. So there are three elements here. One of which is around RAM budget, on which page this is essentially showing as a system admin, you can come here and to provide a budget, seems like 3%, 2%, whatever the case is. And we have the ability to divvy up in between departments, function, location, call centers, or at an organization-wide, you can have a singular budget assigned to it. What comes after this is the ability for you to configure matrix. Matrix is really essentially taking into account performance rating as well as compare ratio positioning range. And I'm very excited to also share with everyone here that our team is currently working toward having RAM integrated with Elmo performance module, in which case we have the data integration and data sync directly from a performance module and have the data readily available within the RAM. So it bypass a lot of the document transfer between. So before we set out the matrix, it's important to also highlight the point around ranges. What matrix can do is not only one single matrix, but we can actually configure in a way that you won't have different matrix depending on the department or the function or different teams. So in this case, we've got finance, HR, and risk. And within each, you could set up your own matrix system in place. Similar to what Cathy has showed us just now. We have the ability to then change the boundaries, the range in between. Once that's in place, you could then select which matrix you want to assign to which department and functions. And here is essentially how you make this to work, is the ability for you to decide at what point or at what sort of ratio do you want to keep for those who are at the below market compare ratio or positioning range. You want to be able to give 8 as a number, for example. 8 is essentially twice as amount of a RAM increase to those who are sitting above the market range, for example. So this is only a relative number, in which case, when you click save, it's going to translate all of that relative ratio into a percentage increase, which is essentially displayed here. And so that is essentially how you run your matrix, is ability for you to enter row number, you save this, and then it's going to help you generate a percentage increase pertaining to how much of a budget you have assigned, how many employees that are under within each quadrant and grid, and then be able to give out relevant amount of budget and relevant RAM increase that is associated to each part of the cycle. So what this essentially tells you is, now that I've got a percentage increase, as a system admin, you could be manually overriding the number if you wish to, or you could go with the basics as recommended as a baseline. So what happens next is managers, they go into the system, they provide recommendation to RAM increase. This would be the baseline for them to start with. But with the addition of setting up business rules in place, having a lot of that parameters in place, it helps provide a level of governance directly to all of the manager within your system that's using the tools, but then to also have that level of oversight and overview in terms of what has been done, what has been changed, are people actually following the recommended as per the matrix and so forth. So there's a lot of configurability and flexibility that could be involved here. It's all about, do we have a robust RAM framework that could be translated into system and into tool that is essentially make your RAM review process equitable. So those are the two things that I've hopefully just covered. One is around total management system and how that can communicate pay transparency to your organizations. But the other is to incorporate matrix into part of your RAM review as well, so that you are assuring and to remove a lot of that subjectivity from the managers, but also to instill a level of methodology in your process. So with that said, that's all from me. I'll pass it back to Cathy.
Great, thanks, Johnny. So yes, just to sort of finish with, after seeing that demo, just some sort of key takeaways. Just communication. Make sure, if you do have a limited budget, that you target and prioritize your high performers. And then also just make sure that you do keep, to bring employees along the journey. So manage their expectations by sort of sharing what you are doing, how you've made decisions with regards to pay, and bring them on that journey so that when you come to actually applying those increases, there's no surprises. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. There's just going to be a short questionnaire that's going to come through just while we wait to get the Q&A going. Okay. All right. So I'm just looking at the Q&A section. It actually looks like you're getting a lot of questions, Johnny, so you might want to, it looks like you're going to be answering them. The first question is, will you automatically get access to my REM as an Almo REM module user?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Great. Okay. And then once the REM review has been signed off, can managers view their team's REM in the REM module screen, even if they didn't recommend REM?
It is strictly around to the HR and system admin to have that level of visibilities. For managers that you don't have direct report to, is about providing level of security and conversationality within the structures. But yes, it's only direct reports and direct managers.
Great, excellent. Okay, and then I've got a question from Kelly. Was the comparison and forecast info you shared based on Australia or New Zealand data? So yes, the actual comparison between what was forecast and what was paid out, that was based on New Zealand data. Somebody says we have a REM module but have never seen my REM in the main Elmo.
Yep. So this requires a bit of a implementation setup from our end. So if you're interested in something like this, feel free to reach out to your account managers or our team, and we'll get that sorted for you.
Okay, so somebody was just asking if we've got the average increases across all levels for Australia. No, unfortunately we don't, sorry. Strategic pays data is New Zealand based only. Check out, maybe talk to Mercer. They have good information in Australia. Right, where were we? When will we get access to my rem as an Almo HRIS module user?
It is already live. So
It is
feel free
already.
to reach out to us. My RAM is already available.
Great. Okay. And then when do you think the REM module will be integrated into performance?
Yeah, so that's coming up in the second half of the year. We'll let everyone know.
Right. If the leaders have moved away from the recommendation, can they see what the original recommendation was and how far they have deviated?
That's an interesting question. Move away from recommendation. Uh, does that refer to leaders exit the company or the change in position or permission?
No, I think what they mean is if, um, the matrix recommendation, if the managers have applied an increase that's different from the matrix recommendation, will they see the matrix recommendation still?
Oh, it will get overwritten, but essentially this will get trailed. So if a manager decided that, it's good to have matrix recommendation as a baseline, but I want to put in extra increase to that person. Obviously, system admin can set up business rule that can detect any change or any increase that's beyond what an ordinary increase should be. So we can set up business rules so that system admin will get to see either a business case or they will get alerted.
Great. Excellent. Somebody was just asking me if we've got any turnover statistics for New Zealand. I do have some, but not off the top of my head. So maybe if you reach out to us directly, we can get that for you. And then we've got another question. When you have the integration set up and you do your initial import of employees into MyRem to start the cycle, do you include or exclude employees who are eligible for REM review on the import spreadsheet? Question mark. Previous, sorry, she's just changed it. Can you see it? Can you see that question, Johnny? Have you got the Q&A open?
Yes, so sorry, should read. Do you include or exclude employees who are ineligible? Yes, you would, when you upload documents or upload the data, you will have a column and then you would just have it was code excluded in RAM review. So you would say a yes or no as part of the employee data bulk update.
Okay. So can you see that question about the performance appraisals?
Yes. So the question is, we have performance appraisals rating from 1 to 5, 1 being exceeding expectation. Would this rating move to RAM process in the same scales? Yes. So if your setup within performance module has got, beyond meet or below expectation, we'll bring that scaled across.
Yes, it's completely customizable, isn't it, to your own performance ratings? Yeah.
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 RAM module is an additional module that need to be purchased. So another one is in my RAM, do you need to manually change total reward components allowance if there were changes outside the RAM review cycles? Yes. So what we have also made available is the ability for you to account for out of cycle or ad hoc RAM changes. So if you have any change associated with it, there is a function where you can go through a RAM review for a specific group of cohort of users. And essentially, it's only their migrant will get impacted and updated, whilst rest of the organization will have the same old line of record.
Excellent.
Is there anything else from the Q&A? That was the last one that I saw, Cathy.
Yeah, it looks like it. I don't know that there are any. Here we go. Just did a refresh. If you have a different system, e.g. not linked to performance but is linked to PIR, is it customizable?
So within the REM module, we have a thing called midpoint, in which case you upload your market data directly to the REM modules. Given that there's no active integration with market data providers, what we do is we allow system admin to upload the data directly to the REM as a spreadsheet or CSV file. So let me, oh, there's a few popping up. So hold on, when was the last one? So will there be a HR split for admin users that HR employees can't see? Yes, we have an HR split system. Yep. Oh, in my RIM. I'll need to come back to you on this one, Najma. Happy to chat offline on this. Bonus calculation from performance module, is that calculated in RAM? Yes, bonus calculation will be calculated in RAM. So what the performance module is to bring up the ratings across. So whatever calculation or whatever setup you've got within RAM will stay intact. Are incentive schemes common among general employees and middle management in most companies? Cathy, do you have a view on this, incentive schemes?
Yeah. I would say, look, it's less common the further down you get the role. I think that is a good question. It will differ. We do see a greater uptick of incentive schemes in the Australian market versus the New Zealand market. But it's not to say you don't still see them, but yeah, definitely more common the more senior up you go. But like lower down roles also in sales or maybe if you're wanting to do like more of a profit share type system, then you would see incentive schemes at that level, lower level role. Yeah.
Yeah. So people get increases based on their position in range, X% for those with, yes. So it's in essence, it's two axes. One is you look at position in range, and the other is your performance rating, essentially. So you can configure in a way that would have each increase different. So Cassie, you've got a question.
I know,
So
I can see that one. Yeah.
some positions like coordinator roles are offered as an additional responsibility on top of an existing role with corresponding time and monetary allowances. However, the same position may also be offered as part of someone else's main role. How should we handle allowances in such a case to ensure consistency and fairness?
I think it's really going to come back to, the way I would approach that would be to actually take the two roles and job size them. Or I guess that would be my preference, would be to use job sizing system and work out how the corresponding size or value of each role. And then it's a question of if the role that they're doing additional responsibility is a bigger role, then you would expect some additional allowances. However, if they're doing additional responsibilities, but it's a similar size, then the argument is, well, they're just doing different types of work. So it's really just trying to understand how big or the responsibilities of the role first to get that consistency and fairness. Hope that helped. Yeah. And then you've got a question, Johnny. What headcount is ideal for this to be implemented at? So talking about, I'm guessing they mean Elmo Rem? Yeah.
Yes, Jessica, that was a great question. It really depends on your need and your current process and what that looks like. Usually, a lot of a client use REM module because spreadsheet become really hard to manage given the growth of the company, given the complexity within your incentive for your bonus structures. Things become really hard to manage on a spreadsheet, and that's why they started using REM modules. So I guess that will be something we can talk more about around your current need right now.
Janine was asking about using the matrix without performance ratings.
Yep.
I mean, to me, it would be obvious that you would just give everyone the same rating and just have one
Yeah.
matrix line.
Yeah, then that should be
Yeah.
straightforward. You don't have the axis, vertical axis. You just have the horizontal all across, and you can just apply a singular increase across each of the different quadrant.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny. So there was a couple of additional questions in the chat. So will pay integrated with payroll module? So that is something that the team is currently exploring in terms of potentially getting data integrated from HR core via HR core. So payroll integrated with HR core and then HR core to REM. So that's where we are thinking at the moment, but more on that in the future. There was one other question. So can Elmo use external RAN benchmarking data to determine PIR? Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Brilliant.
I think that was
Excellent.
it.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you, everyone. Some great engagement. Lots of good questions for you, Johnny, about the Elmo REM. You've piqued their interest. And
Yes.
if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. But yes, a copy of the slides will be made available. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.